Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm Sean Mooney. And we begin with the latest on a death row inmate awaiting a decision on how he will be put to death by the state. The U.S. District Court for the District of Arizona is holding a hearing right now to decide whether or not to pause the execution of Frank Atwood over his request to receive a different method of execution. Atwood is scheduled to be executed on June 8th for his murder conviction and the killing of 8-year-old Vicki Lynn Hoskinson in 1984. Atwood has requested an alternative constitutional method of execution, contending that forcing him to choose between cyanide gas and lethal injection violates his rights. Today, the federal court will determine whether to grant a preliminary injunction which would temporarily halt Atwood's execution. We will have more on the court's decision coming up at 5 and 6 p.m. And as we mentioned, Frank Atwood is scheduled to be put to death on June 8th. News 4 Tucson's Lupita Murillo has been selected by the state to witness the execution. She has covered this story from the very beginning, and today she spoke with 2 retired deputies who worked on the investigation back in 1984. They're also set to serve as execution witnesses next week.
When Vicki Lynn Hoskinson went missing on September 17, 1984, the Sheriff's Department made it a priority to find the 8-year-old who disappeared from her Flowing Wells neighborhood and also to find the person responsible.
People worked around the clock, 7 days a week.
Retired Sergeant Steve Gardner was a deputy back then. He worked in the newly created Behavioral Science Unit. Robert Cox, who is also now retired, worked in the Burglary Unit.
That was a very emotional time for a lot of deputies, and a lot of deputies worked their own time out there searching for her.
10 days after Vicki Lynn disappeared, Frank Jarvis Atwood was arrested in Texas and returned to Tucson as the prime suspect in the case.
Now we had a suspect, and who was not letting on with anything, and it just really made it worse.
7 months later, Vicki Lynn's skull was found by a hiker in a desert area at the end of Ina Road. Cox, along with other deputies, went to the area looking for the rest of the child's remains. None were found. However, both deputies became close with Debbie and George Carlson, Vicki Lynn's parents, and have stayed good friends for nearly 4 decades. Both Cox and Gardner will be witnessing the scheduled execution of Frank Jarvis Atwood. Their message to the convicted killer:
Fought your fight, you've lost. Now you're going to die.
Frank, you have caused this family so much pain. You have no other way to go than to tell them you're sorry.
Vicki Lynn's murder and kidnapping was so horrific and so violent that it affected the entire community, including law enforcement. Sheriff Chris Nanos was working patrol then. We'll have his story coming up at 6. Reporting from the Pima County Sheriff's Department, Lupita Murillo, News 4 Tucson.